There, YouTubers. Xiaofu here. I figure I better make something so you guys don't think my channel is just a lot of hot air. I'm going to show you how to make a belt. First thing you need to know is how big of a belt do you need? How long? You can measure your waist and with your pants on, and then add about 8 inches, because you're going to have a little bit of extra space for holes and your buckle fold over. And the second thing you need to know is how wide of a belt do you need? Your trousers, if they're dress trousers, are going to have smaller loops. So what I did is I made myself some little jigs to measure my belt loops in my pants. So I will show you how to do that. You just take a pair of your pants, and for today it's just a pair of jeans. In here I have a 1.5 inch jig, or 38 millimeter, and that's a pretty standard size for a belt. And you see it fits nice and neat right in there in the belt loops. And you can actually double it up and do it too, and you'll see that it fills out the belt loops a little bit more. Alright, but if you got a working man's belt, a double thickness belt is really good because it won't warp out. So there's a 1.5, and then I have a 1 5/8, and you can see your standard pair of Wrangler jeans, or even Levi's, Lee's. They can take a 1 5/8 inch belt. So you need to choose what size, what width or belt you want. So today I'm going to make a 1.5 inch belt. And the first thing you need to do, or here's the tools you need. You need a strap cutter. A little square works. You got your skiving knife or a utility knife, compass or wing divider, and your straight edge. The reason you need a cutting pad too, because once you use your edges, especially on your skiving knife, you do not want to hit that against the stone. So the reason you use a straight edge is because if you're cutting off a roll of leather, a side, that doesn't come with straight edges, and you need actually a longer straight edge that can accommodate the full length of the side. And I've got this little piece of, it's a skirt off of a holster, and I'm going to show you. You just lay your straight edge out on it, and keeping your blade as flat as possible, you cut a nice straight edge. Once you have that, you're set up to use your strap cutter. Let's put these aside. Alright, your strap cutter, you can see, it's got measurements adjusted into it. And you'll go for this side because here's the blade in here. Right now I want to make an 1.5 inch belt, so I loosen the screw. I take that little 1.5 inch or 38 millimeter jig I made, and I put it right there, and I snug it in, and I tighten up my strap cutter just like that. Boom. Okay, now I already have a belt cut, but it's actually 1 5/8 inches, so I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to make it thinner. And how I do that is it just following the straight guides here. I shove that in there. Okay, and you can see it's starting to trim off that extra. Once you get it set, you just pull your piece of leather right on through. You want to make sure you keep it flush to the sides. This is actually a little bit easier when you're cutting off a side because you have the volume of the leather side to hold everything straight. You may have a little bit of variation in your your width, but that's okay because a lot of material actually comes off when you start to clean up your edges. Alright. Now, when you first start, you may have a little bit of takeaway, so make that your billet into your belt, because you're going to remove some material, and this little curve in isn't going to hurt anything. On the other side, you have a little bit extra curve out, so of course you just slap your old straight edge up on that. And trim that off. And that's straightens you right out. Okay, once that's all done, you take your little square and you come back about 1.5 inches. You can give yourself a little bit of room. I've got my compass set at 1.5 inches, and I just curve it over like that. Same thing, I don't go on the curve I made, I go inwards, and bang. Now there's a little tip cut out. All right, you can buy a belt tipper. It's a relatively expensive tool that just does one thing. It cuts this shape. Or if you got a steady hand, you can use your skiving knife and you cut right around your line. It doesn't have to be perfect on the line, but you should try to keep your blade as straight vertically as possible. All right, or you can of course use your utility knife. And once again, try to keep everything as straight vertically as possible. Bam. Oops. Bam. All right. So that's the only cut you really have to make with your knives at this point. Okay. You figure if you want a belt that has an adjustable buckle, meaning just whatever kind of buckle you want, you're going to have a fold-over section. And you can fasten that with snaps or rivets if it's permanent. Snaps is if you want to change buckles. Or you can actually make it a little shorter and you can stitch it if it's like really permanent. So this is a pretty thick piece of leather. It's 4 mm. And we don't want it that thick. So you mark where your bend over is. Just doesn't have to be perfect. All right. And then we have a mark there. Okay. And if you're a perfectionist, you can slap your square onto that and do that. Now we come back to the knife work. Okay, I like to use either a grinding wheel, a sanding wheel, or I like to use a wire wheel on my drill motor, or a grinder engine if you have one. But you can also do it with a skiving knife or even a utility knife. And what you do, very carefully, you thin that leather out. Try to not go too deep, about maximum half the width or thickness of the leather itself. So that's skiving knife. And if you don't have one of those, well, you can use a utility knife too. You want to adjust the blade so it's only sticking out so far. You don't want too much blade because they tend to bow. And this is one of those utility knives that has the sections of blade to snap off, so you take a chance on snapping it. And remember, you have this thickness to deal with, so come out here and you do the same thing as you did with your skiver, if you don't have the skiver, of course. All right, and that'll actually take off quite a bit of material. Don't go too far, because if you go too far, it'll cut right through your leather. Okay, so another thing you can do is to clean it up. You bend it backwards. And you take off any excess. So just trim it just like that. All right, so now you've actually thinned it out a substantial amount right there. And when you bend it over, it's nice and tidy. All right, so sorry, I'm working around my camera here. Now basically this is an 1.5 inch belt, so that's 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch. Here's your mark. All right. Now you're going to measure 3/4 of an inch. 1, 2, 3, and that's kind of your center mark. Now, if you have a type of buckle that has a prong, well, you need to have something for that prong to go through. So you can use what's called a bag punch or an oblong punch. All right. You've already marked your center here. You want to kind of line your bag punch up with your groove. Bam. There's your slot. Now, fold her over. I like to have 2 rivets or fasteners, but you don't need to, and for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to make 1. And you just kind of eyeball your center. Go back a little bit from your slot you just made and poke a hole with your awl, and then you take your punch punch your hole. Now it'll leave a mark on the other side, so you follow your mark. Alright, so now you have your slot and your hole for your rivet or your snap. Obviously, if you're going to do a stitch line, you're just going to take your shears and groove yourself a hole front and back and tap in your stitching holes. But for this purpose, we're just going to do rivet holes. Okay, so that's what you have. Now, obviously, this is ugly. So, look, just kind of eyeball your center once again. All right, and ooh, sorry, you adjust that to 3/4 of an inch or about halfway. There we go. Set it here, set it there, and mark out a semicircle. Once again, that doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to clean it up with your finish work. All right. So now we have the billet end and we have the buckle end. What are we forgetting? Holes for your prong on your buckle. So you want, I'd say you want 3 inches. All right, at least 3 inches. So here's a 3-inch mark. All right. Now every inch or inch and a half, depending on your personal preference, bam, 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 and bam. There's your holes. All right. All sorts of specialty tools in leather you can buy. A regular round hole punch will work just fine. I have an oblong punch that I use. It's just a little oblong. It's not perfectly round. Come to my first hole. Make sure I'm about center. This may not be perfect. Boom. 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 Oops. And one last hole. Right there. Bam. Okay. Oop. I didn't measure that correctly, so it's a little bit too close, but you get the general idea. All right. Now we have the belt blank. I'm not going to carve this belt. All right. I'm not going to do it. Which that would be really time consuming. So, look, once you have all this done, you have a rough cut belt. Okay, you can move all your tools aside, out of your way. That back up. Get your back put away. Get your knives out of the way. Right? Now it's going to be a different set of tools. So, garbage that. So, listen, I went through the sharpening of your hand tools. You're going to use an edging tool, okay? You're going to take these sharp edges off. You start at your point. Now remember, it's kind of sloppy because when you cut it, I told you don't worry about it being perfect. So you come around here, keep that about a 45-degree angle, and just trim that whole edge off. This serves a couple purposes. Once, when you burnish it, when it's all said and done, it helps that to round out and be, you know, nice looking. It's the finishing touch. All right. Oopsies. Switchers around. Whoopsies. Knocking things over. Come around the other side. Careful when you go into that thin part that you made for the buckle, because it'll try to grab that beveling. All right. Now the front is done. It's beveled. See, nice and kind of rounded around. And okay, now the back side, you do the very same thing. You want to be careful when you go down into that little divot for the buckle, but you still got to clean it out a little bit. So, same thing. Now the back, the flesh side of the leather, that's the side that faces the meat of the cow, can be a little bit fibery and it'll make your tools jump around. So you have to be kind of willing to kind of go back over and do it again. And flesh side can also be a little bit spongy, like it was here at the tip. You can see how it pushes a little bit of that fiber over. That's okay, no sweat, because we're going to flip that. We'll come around, we're going to take that extra bit of fiber that we just pushed, and we're going to kind of trim it off of there. All right. Now this is going to be a single layer belt. If you have a double layer belt, you would do all of this after you're done stitching your two sides of leather together. But this is single layer, simple craft style belt. All right. Now I didn't cut that round out. I should probably do that. Do not do this with your skiving knife, at least not on the stone slab. All you want to do is to just kind of round that out and make it neater. All right. Doesn't have to be perfect unless you are a perfectionist. Then of course, please do be perfect. And you come around, bevel that out. Okay. All right. There's a whole bunch of chemicals that leather workers use, mainly dyes and glues, some oils, and there's this stuff called gum trichanth, which is a burnishing aid. And burnishing simply means to press and polish the edge. So this is gum trichanth. I think I got this at Ivan Leather, which is they contract with Tandy Leather. You're going to see a similar bottle. See the Chinese label over the English label. So you can do this a couple different ways. I suppose you could use a brush or a dauber, or as I do on this down and dirty stuff, I just use my finger and I put that right along the edge. Right? You can do this before you dye your leather. Oops. Or you can do it after. Right? If you do it before, you might have a little bit of run over, but that's okay. It's just a working man's belt. You don't need to worry about things, because people usually be impressed just because you made it yourself. All right, so there we have the tip. Let me wipe my hand off here. Always keep yourself some shop rags handy, whether they're paper towels or what, it doesn't matter. All right, you want to give that gum trichanth a little bit of time to get tacky. And then you're going to take your slicking tool, or if you have a slicking wheel, that's awesome. All right. You're going to come up on that, find the appropriate size groove, and you're going to round that out. Right? And I don't know if you can see it in the video. Maybe I'll see if I can get another bit of light on this subject here. Maybe that helps. So we're just slicking that around. Now you might do this a couple times. It depends on the thickness of your leather or the fineness of your belt. But this is one of the last things you're going to do, and it's the finish work. Remember, leather work it ain't pretty. Nothing's beautiful till it's done. Okay? So just keep that in your mind. Don't get frustrated. Just remember, nothing's beautiful till it's done, and you're going to be your own worst critic too. People are going to see what you're doing and go, oh wow, that's super awesome, I wish I could do that. Well, they could do that, but you're the one doing it. So don't be critical of yourself unless you really do something silly like take a huge chunk out of your finished piece of leather. So there we have that slicked, and that gum trichanth is still wet, still damp, so we're not going to fiddle with it anymore. We're going to let it sit like that, but you get the idea. You'll do that all along both edges, and you'll also do it at the billet end fold over. Now you have a belt. See, from tip to end. Right? That's your belt. That's simple. Just, regular simple belt. Now, this is 4mm leather, pretty thick, decent leather. It's pretty supple too. So what's going to happen is you're going to wear this thing, and your sweat and everything else is going to warp it. It'll take on a shape all its own. It's going to take on your shape or the shape of whoever wears it. Some people don't like that. Some people want a clean, tidy, straight edge belt. To do that, you actually have to put a liner in it, a really thin piece of leather of some type, and you need to stitch it. That'll help it to keep from wallowing out and stretching, which is, that's what skin does. That's what our skin does. You get fat, you get skinny, you get muscular, you get skinny. Everything ends up in skinny. Not me, though. But if you want to help to delay that process, you just do a stitch line. And I believe I made a video on how to stitch leather. Now, this is kind of plain. Maybe you want to make it a little bit more dressy. A couple ways to do that. You can take your compass or wing divider and set it at about 1/8 or 1/4 inch. There's about 1/4 inch. And you can draw it right along the edge of your leather like this. And now you have a nice clean line that follows the contour of your belt. Alright? You do that on both sides, obviously, because you don't just want one line. That would look kind of silly. Come around the other side. Bam. And that's like your simplest decoration. If you want something more than that, you can actually take your tools and you can, well, we'll take a triangle beveler here. Alright? And you can set that on your line. You need to case your leather, by the way. You need to get it kind of damp. For this purpose, I'm not gonna. You need to get the triangle part facing back, set that a little deep, get it a tap, and do it again, and again, and again. Alright, now you have a stamped border, or a common stamped border is what's called a camouflage tool. It looks like this. Alright. Same thing. Set it up on the line. Tap it. Tap it. Tap it. Tap it. There you go. Now you have a camouflage perimeter. If you do that all around the belt, it'll take you about, well, this is a 3/8 camouflager, so it'll take you about a half hour to do the whole belt if you're careful. The hardest part is actually here at the tip, because the tip curves, and if you can see that, well, let me pull it up here. Your camouflage tool is like this, but your tip is coming together at a different angle. So what you can do is you set your corner up here, and then you set deeper on the closest corner, and then you do the very same thing, all right, on the other side. Set the first corner at the tip, and then deeper corner, and you end up with this, which kind of covers up that weird connecting angle. And then after that, it's just follow around the edge, the curve. Listen, always start your stamping at the tip, because if you start back here, the leather's going to give a little bit each time, all right? And by the time you make it all the way up here, you're going to have some weird non-symmetrical, you know, you may have a little tiny bit of stamp on one side and a full stamp on the other. So you want to keep it as even and tidy as possible. All right, that's how you make a simple belt. Just a couple tools. Now, remember, I mean, it's really important. This is your cutting tool, right? This is your skiving tool. This is your cutting tool. And you don't need an expensive skiving knife. As time goes by, if you enjoy this craft and you want to do it more, yeah, get better tools. But this series of videos is for the bargain basement, just starting out crafter. There's no reason that Joe Spiffy Normal or Jane Spiffy Normal can't make something nice with their own hands. There's just no reason. You don't have to buy a full side of leather. You can go to your local leather suppliers, and you can buy belt blanks if you don't want to cut the belt out. All right, not everybody has a strap cutting tool. All right, not everybody has the tools I have, and Lord knows there's people that have more than me. But essentially, this is your belt. All right, that's it. Okay, now you know. Remember, it ain't beautiful till it's finished.